welcome to the AZ Arizona Low Carb Holiday Boot Camp. My name is Corey Jenks. I am a pharmacist. Wait a minute, a pharmacist. What is a pharmacist doing at a low carb thing? Aren't you all about medications, pharmacist guy? I am actually not. A little quick background on me. I found low carb, it was about 6 years ago, driving around Sedona, actually listening to a podcast. And so my wife is a nurse practitioner. We went down this rabbit hole of low carb. We were pretty healthy before. We're jerks because we're kind of young, so we got away with a lot of stuff. But we just have really applied it to our patients and found a lot of success. A lot of patients coming off medications. So I joke with my patients when they follow low carb and they stop their diabetes medicines. I say, I hate medicines. I went to the wrong profession, but here we are. Tonight we have a lot of phenomenal information. So if you are brand new to low carb, if you have heard a little bit about low carb, or if you have Googled low carb or keto, which statistically I checked Google Trends before tonight, you have done that. I know you have. You're going to find that there's a lot of great information, and especially with the holidays, I say let's get a jump start. We don't wait till January 1st. You can get going or keep going on your journey right now. So tonight, here's the format. We got 3 amazing presenters. They're going to each talk for about 15 minutes or so. And at the end, we're going to do a big full-on Q&A back and forth discussion with all of us. I'm not presenting anything. I'm just moderating this thing. So if you have a question as we're going through this, if you want to drop it in the chat and I'll save it for later, if you want to send it to myself personally or to everyone, I'll collect those and we can go to it at the end. If you want to hold on it to the end, we're going to do that. All right. Are there any questions from our amazing participants tonight? Yes, Corey, can you tell me about
that everybody mute themselves? We have a couple unmuted, and our first speaker, we don't want to interrupt him.
Yes, he is quite interesting. So thank you, Allison. Allison is our second speaker, so you definitely want to make sure you're muted. You don't want to make her upset because she's got too much good stuff to be talking over. So with that, Dr. Crutchfield, if you want to share your screen so we get you going, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this guy because he's amazing. So he is a graduate of the University of Nevada Medical School, and he completed his residency in emergency medicine at the University of California, Davis in Sacramento. And since 1998, he has practiced in a variety of settings that encompass community emergency departments, level 1 trauma centers, and rural critical access hospitals. Before embarking on his lifelong dream of medical school at the University of Nevada, Dr. Crutchfield worked for 14 years in law enforcement, retiring at the rank of lieutenant, and this blew my mind. This is incredible. Most doctors have only been doctors, and he's got some great life experience there. So his interests include obesity medicine, metabolic health, and emergency cardiology inspired by his own personal and family health journey. As an American Academy of Emergency Medicine diplomat for over 20 years, Dr. Crutchfield recently was nominated to the Ethics Committee. Dr. Crutchfield is board certified in emergency medicine and became Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners accredited earlier this year. He is currently working as a medical director for a large local government healthcare agency in Phoenix and provides metabolic health information and consultations through ourlowcarb.com. And his wife, Jane, a critical care and forensic nurse. He's also going to retire soon to be a professional video gamer, he told me earlier. So with that, Dr. Crutchfield, take it away. I am so excited to hear what you have to share tonight.
Thank you so much, Corey, for the gracious introduction. So I'm starting things off tonight with an introduction to metabolic health. So we have medical people in the audience and we have lay people in the audience. So I'm going to keep this in simple terms as possible. And we're going to gloss over some things, but we're going to really kind of stress the important things. So what I would like everyone to get from this is that metabolic health is a very complex subject, and there are just so many things that we know, and probably so many more things that we still don't know. And we're constantly learning. And for me, that's what keeps me motivated in medicine. So how does one get from emergency medicine to metabolic health? We could also say, well, how does one get from law enforcement to medicine? That's a story for another time. My background, I am a Washoe County Sheriff's Office lieutenant, retired. I took an early retirement to go to the University of Nevada School of Medicine. I went to residency at UC Davis in Sacramento. And as Corey stated, I'm an SMHP founding member and accredited clinician as of this year. So some disclosures for this presentation. I have a website, ourlowcarb.com. Theoretically, it could be monetized. Really haven't yet. It's more for informational purposes for folks. Again, a founding member of SMHP. So low carb is my bias. I freely admit it. Otherwise, I have no financial interest to disclose. I don't sell you any products. I'm not going to spam you or anything like that. So my start in low carb was for two reasons. Number one, my own personal health journey. We're going to talk about metabolic syndrome and metabolic health in this. So I want people to get the basic understanding of what it is we're talking about. I met the criteria in my late 50s for having metabolic syndrome. Now, as an emergency physician, I would see people coming through the emergency department with chronic conditions, and the aftermath and the end results of these chronic conditions. And I would see many of the same people over and over and over again. And, the diabetics, for example, the cardiac patients, the heart failure patients, COPD patients, they were getting at end stage of their disease. And I felt, I felt that conventional medicine was failing them. Yeah, you come into the emergency department with this problem, we're going to put a Band-Aid on this. We're going to increase your insulin because your blood sugar is higher. We're going to put you on this other med. We're going to do this, but they kept coming back and they kept getting worse. And so for those two reasons, I really became interested in metabolic health. I was a skeptic, basically. I'm a physician. I had nutrition in medical school. They told me it's calories in, it's calories out, and you just need to eat less and move more. Eat small, regular meals throughout the day. I drank the conventional medical advice like Kool-Aid. Later in my career, we started going to what we call evidence-based medicine. And I was shocked to find out that there's very little evidence-based to many of these things we're espousing in conventional nutrition. So enough on the introduction. Let's go into the main part of the talk. So what is this metabolic health we're talking about? So in order to get into that, I think we first have to get in, what is metabolism? My metabolism. People here say that all the time. My metabolic rate. What is metabolism? So, I did bad. I need to go back. Metabolism. Just looking up, this is a dictionary definition, is the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life. Well, a living organism can be a one-celled organism, bacteria. In fact, it doesn't even have to be a cell. It could be a virus. But they all use chemical processes to maintain life. So I'm going to give you a grossly oversimplified overview of metabolism here, because I only have 15 to 18 minutes. And out of respect for your time, these are topics that people take college courses in biology, cell biology, molecular biology, biochemistry. This is pretty much the first year of medical school. And so everything starts at the cellular level. We have trillions of cells within our bodies. The cells are made up of many structures. And then each cell lives in harmony with other cells. So a group of cells that has the same purpose is same function is called a tissue. And then we have a group of tissues together forms an organ. And then a group of organs is an organ system, and that basically the sum of all the parts equals the whole organism. So you can see a diagram up here, which is kind of a breakdown of the structures of a cell. And this is the basic level of our metabolism. All of these require balanced, how does the brain cell know what the heart cells need or the GI tract need? They require balanced conditions to thrive and grow, and they need communications between these systems. So you have both local conditions in the tissues and the cells, and you have global throughout the whole organism. And so many of these are dictated by cellular receptors, by enzymes, by hormones, which are the body's signaling method. These are chemical messengers. And also we get these messages, and then we can turn certain genes off and on to express, make certain proteins and things. So again, this is a very oversimplified thing, but I don't want to get so stuck in the weeds, and I don't expect you all to be medical students in the first night, but it is a very complicated dance that we're doing every nanosecond of the day, all our cells in the body. So we have all these hormones that communicate. We have thyroid hormones. We have gastrointestinal hormones. We have satiety hormones. We have stress hormones. We have many other hormones, including sex hormones, testosterone and estrogen. Both males and females have both, and they have effects. We have, again, glucagon, ghrelin, insulin-like growth factor. This is the tip of the iceberg. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of these mechanisms. But these are just some examples. But the main one we're interested in tonight, are you ready for the reveal? It's insulin. We're going to talk a lot about insulin and its effects on metabolic health tonight. So, preparing for this talk, I wanted to get a good textbook definition of metabolic health. I pulled one paper, a recent paper, was just what we call a meta-analysis. A meta-analysis is where people look at multiple papers on the same subject, and they put all these results together and see if they can find trends. Well, this metabolic health paper looked at 100,000 papers in multiple different studies, and they couldn't really agree on a definition of metabolic health. So I'm going to give a shout out to Cecile Seth. Cecile is here in the chat. Cecile is from metabolicmultiplier.org. Cecile is the one that got me responsible or involved in many of these endeavors, working with SMHP and such. And so on her website, she has an interview with a biochemist, and basically his take on it is that metabolic health is the absence of disease. Seems pretty simple, isn't it? So we want our cells functioning, we want our tissues and organs functioning, we want the whole body functioning without disease. So this talk is focused on how to do that. So how did we get here? In the 1960s, there was, began actually in the 50s, we began having research into heart attacks. Heart disease was rising in the country. President Eisenhower was hospitalized with a heart attack for, back in those days, it was like, oh, you had a heart attack, you're on bed rest for 2 months. There were no interventions, there really were no medications. You just had to rest for 2 months. So this became a big topic of discussion, and eventually led to some things that led us down the wrong rabbit hole as far as diet heart hypothesis. I don't really have time to go into that tonight, but this gentleman, Gerald Revan, he was a researcher and he was studying myocardial infarction after events, and he was identifying several risk factors. It took him several years to put this all together. And he gave a speech. The Banting lecture is for the, I believe it's the ADA, or the Diabetes Association. It's their keynote address every year. And he named this syndrome that he'd come up with based on these risk factors. He called it Syndrome X initially. We now know it as metabolic syndrome. So what is metabolic syndrome exactly? There are 5 criteria, and 3 of the 5 are required to make the diagnosis. So this includes waist circumference, greater than 40 inches in men or 35 inches in women, as measured relaxed around the navel. He also identified in his group high triglycerides, greater than 150, low HDL, less than 50 in women or less than 40 in men, a blood pressure that most of us consider the borderline range, or actually being treated for high blood pressure. And he also identified that glucose abnormalities or elevated fasting blood glucose was part of the syndrome. So if we take a look, this is data from 2017. The leading causes of death are cardiovascular disease, cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, and diabetes. If you take trauma out of there, 5 of the top 6 causes of death are all linked to metabolic syndrome. Got to go back again. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So here are some sobering statistics for us. Even before we succumb to our metabolic disease, we have metabolic illness. And right now, based on the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey in 2016, they identified, and many of us in the metabolic space will quote the statistics, that 88% of the population will have at least one marker of metabolic syndrome. And that 2/3 or more of the United States population are going to be insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, or diabetic. So it's an incredible problem, and one that we can do something about, as we'll see. So let's get into the cardiovascular disease risk factors. This was the major, this is the major cause of death right now, and here they are. Here are the top 5s. We have hypertension. We have cholesterol. Interestingly, there's an association between LDL, high LDL cholesterol, and cardiovascular disease. As many of us in this space will say, association does not mean causation. It's based on epidemiologic evidence, but really, when you look at the American Heart Association cardiovascular risk calculators, they go by HDL and triglycerides. They do not mention LDL in these risk calculators that we in medicine use to decide who goes on medicine, who needs preventative. The next biggest one is diabetes, obesity, and then smoking, obviously. But wait, there's more. Remember the ShamWow guy? All right, I'm going to pitch you some more stuff. So metabolic syndrome is not just associated with those things that I've mentioned. We've mentioned dyslipidemia, but this syndrome leads to the inner lining of the blood vessels being dysfunctional. This leads to increased clotting factors or procoagulant effects that can cause clotting in arteries and other places where we don't want it. Hemodynamic changes, sympathetic nervous system activity, retention of sodium in the kidneys, which again contributes to high blood pressure, and then markers of inflammation. We're going to I only have time to briefly touch on how it touches on inflammation, abnormal uric acid metabolism, and then it's associated very strongly as a causal relationship with polycystic ovarian syndrome, leading to infertility and prediabetes in women, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which used to be a pretty rare phenomenon. When I was in medical school, it was all alcoholic liver disease, but these days we see it left and right, which can then lead to liver failure, cirrhosis, and these types of things. And there are 13 forms of cancer that are definitely linked to obesity and metabolic syndrome. So up until the late 60s, we couldn't measure insulin. We knew about glucose tolerance. We knew about diabetes. There was a pathologist who began doing insulin assays, Dr. Joseph Kraft. I had the privilege of listening to a lecture he did with Ivor Cummins and Dr. Agatsson, who was the founder of the South Beach diet, and also, more importantly, the coronary artery calcium score. Dr. Kraft said in his book that those with cardiovascular disease not identified with diabetes are simply, i.e. insulin resistance, are simply undiagnosed. And this was, based on his autopsies, thousands and thousands of autopsies, and these over 14,000 oral glucose tolerance tests with insulin levels. He identified these patterns, and I'm not going to get in the weeds with this, but what I'm going to say is that insulin resistance starts with this. You have a normal insulin release pattern. We eat food that stimulates the body to produce some insulin. That insulin then has effects on, telling the body we're in the fed state. And as long as the insulin is high, the cells will uptake glucose, and they will not release fat from fat stores. And this is a normal physiologic function. But over time, if you're constantly stimulating insulin, the insulin peaks higher and it lasts longer until finally, several hours later, it's at this tremendous peak, and it's constantly elevated. And so we are always in energy storage mode. We're trying to get rid of this energy, the glucose in the body. And so he identified these patterns. The last pattern, these more in type 1 diabetics who don't make insulin. So they don't have much of an insulin response, if at all. And you can see this in the very late stages of type 2 diabetes. So these are some
Doc, this is Corey, just a reminder, we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
For you.
We're about 3/4 of the way through. So this is a very complicated diagram, which we're not going to go into all. Basically, what I just said was we eat, insulin rises, you get in fat storage mode. Think of it as a fight. You have a fight between insulin, being Sugar Ray Leonard, and all the other hormones, the counterbalancing hormones, being Roberto Duran. And they're fighting it out constantly. And eventually, insulin always wins. No mas. You can't fight it. Again, and this is what it ends up leading to. So insulin resistance can occur years before people are diagnosed with diabetes. The middle line here is prior to diabetes being diagnosed. The other line is after it's been diagnosed. And you can see that almost 20 years before, you see the hyperinsulin all the time. And then we get insulin resistant as a result of the insulin being elevated all the time. And then we get to the abnormal glucose tolerance or pre-diabetes. And then finally, we get the pre-diabetes complications, the insulin resistant complications, cardiovascular disease. Pre-diabetes, a recent paper came out, and even pre-diabetes was associated with an increased risk of all-cause mortality as well as cardiovascular disease. This is from Ben Bickman's book on insulin resistance called Why We Get Sick, the hidden epidemic at the root of most chronic disease. He shows the effects on lipids. He shows how insulin resistance leads to hypertension by these mechanisms. He show how it becomes pro-inflammatory. Your fat actually gets sick. It can't release the stored fatty acids. It's just bursting. It's like a suitcase. You're trying to stuff more stuff in it. You can't get anything else in it. So you have cells that come in, the white cells, macrophages, they send out these inflammatory signals to the body, and it causes inflammation throughout the entire body. And finally, and I'm just briefly going to touch on this, there are some people that believe in and there's evidence to support this polyunsaturated fatty acid hypothesis, vegetable oils and sea oils, and that too high a level of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids can impair cellular energy utilization and can be pro-inflammatory. So again, that's hours worth of content, but there is good evidence behind that, and I think this is even the mainstream media is picking this up now. This was an article from Time that Dr. Ovadia on his website referenced. Time magazine, when vegetable oil isn't as healthy as you think. Basically, these fatty acids have double bonds in them, which means they're prone to oxidation when heated or under stress, and that oxidation can impair the energy metabolism within your cells. So how do we treat this? Diet, medications, lifestyle, time-restricted feeding or intermittent fasting. So you only eat, say, for example, within an 8-hour window during the day. So the insulin levels have time to return to baseline. So you have time to start mobilizing your fat stores. And then, this is the subject of the talk, low carb, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction. Low carb in most research studies is defined as less than 130 grams of carbohydrates a day. I would say that's fairly liberal. You get to ketogenic diets, which are less than 20 grams of carbohydrates a day. I think there's a range in between, and there's really no one size fits all, but you will have benefits if you're in that range. We knew this 175 plus years ago. There was a paper written in the 1860s in London by by William Banting on his weight loss, basically cutting out starches, beer, and other fatty things. Joy Kitty, one of my favorite dietitians, low carb dietitian, just tweeted a few months ago this paper, how we were treating diabetics in the hospital. Sir William Osler, the founder of medicine, basically modern medicine, in his textbook, this is how we treated diabetes, and it worked. Ketogenic diets work in epilepsy. And we're relearning this today. The Virta Health trials have shown that you can put diabetes into remission and reduce cardiovascular risk factors just by going low carb. So again, lifestyle, stress, importance of sleep, the role of cortisol, stress. Again, so I'm going to conclude. This was just an article for the other day saying, those of you who are sports fans, Tampa Bay won the Super Bowl last year. Tom Brady is performing at a high level in his 40s. And here's an article by Rob Gronkowski. And he's basically saying that Tom Brady helped him quit processed sugar. And he believes that's one reason he's still playing at the top of his game. So anyone can benefit from this, from the elite athletes like Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski to the, this is a 59-year-old armchair quarterback grandmother, and the other photo there. So anyone can benefit from it.
All right. Thank
That's
you.
all I got for you. Wish we had more time.
All right. Yes. Thanks, Dr. Crutchfield. I know we'll do this again, and we'll give you the full reign to go deeper on that. And if you can X out of yours, we'll get Allison's presentation up here. As she's getting that up, a couple of big things out of that this idea of metabolic syndrome. So I'm a pharmacist. I started pharmacy school in 2007. When I started learning about this, like metabolic syndrome was like a new thing, that syndrome X, and now it is like the main thing that I treat. And so there was a recent article that I saw, or that's come out, that you talked about those five things that give you that are metabolic syndrome, and only 12% of American adults don't have one of the five. So only 12% of adults don't have some form of metabolic syndrome, which is bad on so many levels. And I don't need to go into all those right now. So it's extremely important to get that under control. So Allison, do you want to start sharing yours? And I'm excited to see yours, because if you have not eaten yet tonight, congratulations, you were going to be mouth-watering this whole time. And so Allison is a certified nutrition consultant and professional speaker based in Scottsdale. She specializes in optimizing individual health through balanced nutrition and lifestyle changes. She works with people just like you, yes, you, looking at you, who want to learn how proper nutrition can help you to look and feel your very best. Through personal experience and work with many clients over the years, Allison has become a proponent of the low-carb lifestyle. Today, she will give you a summary of what a low-carb way of eating looks like, the 3 main roadblocks to avoid, and the many delicious foods to embrace, as I'm looking at them right now. Presenting Low Carb Nutrition Jumpstart, please welcome Allison Ridderford. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Corey. Dr. Crutchfield, thank you. You gave us all a great explanation of what metabolic health means and what metabolic syndrome is. And both you and Corey referred to this study in 2018 out of the University of North Carolina that found that 88% of us are metabolically unhealthy, which leaves 12% healthy, as Corey mentioned to us. That's a really scary high number, really scary. And most people don't even realize that they fall into that category. Guess what the best way of eating is to combat metabolic syndrome? It's low carb. So let's talk about food. Dr. Crutchfield even said, there's kind of loose guidelines around what does low carb even mean? We've all heard about it, but if you ask 10 people, you're probably going to get 10 different answers. So what I'm going to give you here is not set in stone. It's also pretty different for everybody because everyone is individual. It's kind of based on what's your state of health and what are your health goals. But in general guidelines, a low carb way of eating would be eating less than 100 grams of total carbohydrates a day. A ketogenic diet would be eating less than 25 grams of total carbs per day. Now, different people produce ketones at different levels, so your carbohydrates might be a little higher or a little lower. That's something that you would have to explore based on just how your physiology works. But the average American eats 250 to 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. And most of these are not coming from sweet potatoes and carrots. That's a lot of carbohydrates, and it's really easy. They add up quickly. I'm going to give you some perspective. So let's look at, what does 25 grams of carbohydrates look like? There's some examples here of both whole and processed food, and these are the higher carb foods. If you're trying to be keto, then just eating a quarter of a bagel, you've already hit your 25 grams of carbohydrates for the day. Or let's say you just want to be low carb, you eat one whole bagel or a large serving of rice or pasta, and you're already at that 100 grams of carbohydrates. That's why I said it kind of adds up really quickly. Here are some common low carb foods. And you'll notice that these are really all whole foods. There's no processed foods in here. When people go on a diet, they tend to restrict what they eat, and then they're hungry. And being hungry is not a sustainable long-term. And so the diet eventually fails. So the beauty of the low carb way of eating is it's really encouraged to eat these healthy low carb foods until you're truly full. And if you're trying to stay under 25 grams of carbohydrates, which sounds like it's really difficult to do, you could fill up on 36 eggs. I mean, that's crazy. Believe me, you're going to get full before you eat 36 eggs or 25 cups of leafy greens. All of these green labeled foods here are really good low carb choices. Here's one thing I talk to all of my clients about, because regardless of how you choose to eat, it may be keto, it may be low carb, it may be the standard American diet. It really doesn't matter. No matter what you choose, the first step in changing your diet to a healthier one is really trying to avoid what I call the 3 roadblocks. These are 3 categories of food that are really the main cause of metabolic syndrome and a whole host of other diseases. Let's take a look at the roadblocks. The first one is really not going to surprise anybody. It's sugar. Now, there's 2 kinds of sugar. There's natural sugar, like that found in fruits, vegetables, unsweetened dairy. And then there's the added sugar. And it's really the added sugar that is causing problems for us. When we eat sugar, our blood sugar rises really high. That's the amount of sugar or glucose inside of our bloodstream. While that's also an energy source, we're putting so much energy in our bodies that most people can't use it all up. And that glucose or energy that we don't use gets stored as fat. It has to go somewhere. It comes out of the bloodstream. It's got to go somewhere. It gets stored as fat. Eventually, Dr. Crutchfield mentioned this, your body can't produce enough of the hormone insulin to keep that blood sugar down. And when that happens, it's called insulin resistance. And your blood sugar starts to climb higher and higher, and you end up with either prediabetes or diabetes. Added sugar is also linked to high blood pressure, heart disease, fatty liver, obesity, dementia, cancer, acne, mood disorders, even wrinkles. Second roadblock, refined carbohydrates, really processed food. Think cereal, bread, pasta, chips, tortillas, pastries, fruit juice even. Once these refined foods are inside of our body, they break down into roadblock number 1. They turn into sugar. The body really doesn't know any difference. And they do just as much damage as all the things I mentioned when I talked about sugar. Now, the third roadblock is not talked about that much, although Dr. Crutchfield mentioned it, and it is starting to get some media attention. But it's still also referred to as heart healthy many times. And those are the processed or industrialized vegetable or seed oils. What happens, and Dr. Crutchfield kind of mentioned this, is they get inside our body. We can't break these oils down. And so they oxidize and they cause inflammation. Inflammation is at the root of every single disease. Examples of some of these oils would be corn, canola, sunflower, safflower, soy. They're everywhere. Anything you have that has packaged food with oil in it, it's going to be one of these oils. When you eat out at a restaurant, 99% of the restaurants, they're using these oils. These oils are cheap and people are watching their bottom line. You can't control what is outside your house, but you can control what's in your cupboard and what you cook with. So I want you to throw these away and you're going to replace them with some healthy fats and oils. And that is going to be talked about in just a minute. I have a whole screen for you. Now you might be looking at the slide thinking, okay, what's left to eat? I kind of like all this stuff. A whopping 75% of the items in the grocery store, 3 out of every 4 items, contains 1 or more of these roadblocks. So these foods are really hard to avoid. They're everywhere. There are many delicious alternatives, I promise you. And when you cut down on these foods and you replace them with some of the foods that I'm going to talk about, you will feel so much better. I promise you. Let's talk about some of those. Here's where I encourage people to start. Prioritize protein intake. Most of us, we get way too little protein, especially women. I see this with almost all of my female clients. They are not eating enough protein. Not only does protein keep you full and satisfied, but it's the building block of our bodies. It's important for the growth and the repair of every part of the body, all the way down to the cellular level. We can't survive without it. A good starting point on protein would be to eat 1 gram of protein for every pound of optimal body weight. The most nutrient-dense and efficient way to get that much protein is through animal products, meat, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy. But if you don't eat animal products, you can also get protein through plants, nuts and seeds, soy. I prefer like a tofu or a tempeh or something that's fermented is really the healthiest version. If you're eating low carb, definitely if you're eating keto, it's hard to incorporate a lot of beans and legumes into your diet just because they are on the higher carb side. Here's something kind of fascinating though. Our bodies, they need a certain amount of protein. And until we get that protein, the brain is going to keep saying, eat, eat, eat. So that's one reason why if you eat a diet really high in carbohydrates, you never really feel satisfied. You keep getting hungry. You keep reaching for something else. That's your body saying, give me the protein that I want. Protein really helps to moderate those hunger signals. So you know when you're truly hungry and you know when you're truly full. You should do an experiment. Take a couple days of just whatever you eat on a regular basis and add up those grams of protein and see if you happen to be under eating. Once you satisfy those protein needs, you'll watch because your satiety, that feeling of fullness, will go way up and those cravings for carbs will go way down. All right, let's shift over to fat now, healthy fat. You may have heard that keto or low carb is all about drowning yourself in heavy whipping cream and butter. But the best advice I can give is eat your protein, eat the fat that comes with your protein, and you don't need to be adding a ton of extra fat to be successful. Let's look at some healthy fat sources. You're going to notice on this screen, there is some saturated fat like butter, coconut oil. These are fats that have been demonized over the years, but saturated fat is actually healthy for you. It's something that we need in our diet. Having it be bad for you, that's outdated and inaccurate material, advice, very outdated advice. We know that not to be true now. Saturated fat is actually necessary for the structural integrity of every single cell in our body. I mean, that's pretty important right there. It's also key for brain health, along with healthy skin, joints, and it helps to manage inflammation. We need to eat a lot of healthy fat. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s like I did, you were probably brainwashed into thinking, if you eat fat, you get fat. That is so not true. It's hard to get out of our heads, but it is not true. The things that are causing people to get fat and promote disease are the sugar, the refined foods, and those seed oils. Here's some signs that you might not be getting enough fat in your diet. Losing your hair, dry eyes, hormonal issues, always feeling hungry, even having trouble concentrating. Fat, it just kind of keeps our entire system running smoothly. So throw away those seed oils that I talked about. Here are some good alternatives. In my pantry, I mainly cook with olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil. Those are the things I have in my pantry. I also use butter and ghee quite often. I talked about protein and I talked about fat, but a low carb way of eating also includes some carbohydrates. Now, as much as possible, those carbohydrates should come from whole foods like fruits and vegetables. Here's a way to remember which vegetables are low carb and which are on the higher carb side. Except for corn and peas, those vegetables that grow above the ground, those are your lower carb vegetables. Peppers, leafy greens, some of the cruciferous vegetables, zucchini, asparagus. If you tolerate vegetables, eat as many of these as you want. The higher carb vegetables are the root vegetables. Those are the ones that grow below the ground. Carrots, potatoes, sweet potato, beets. If you're trying to stay on a keto diet, then these are generally avoided. And on a low carb diet, they're minimized, but people still do eat them. The very biggest rule of thumb, though, when it comes to the carbohydrate part of eating, is that any of the things on this screen are so much healthier than the simple carbs found in processed food, like crackers, chips, bread, bagels, etc. So if you're going to eat carbohydrates, enjoy something that is a real food. And as far as fruit, your best bet would be berries as a treat and avocados as often as you like. Those are the basics for getting started on a low carb diet. Beware the roadblocks, start reducing those high carb foods, and embrace all of the delicious low carb foods. Now here's a few other tips to get you jump started. Figure out your starting point. How many carbs do you need a day? How much protein do you get? How much fat? Start reading food labels and become aware of what's the makeup of your food. Also, think about why you want to change how you're eating. If you have a goal of losing 30 pounds because there's a high school reunion coming up, that's fine, but that doesn't really set you up for long-term change. But maybe wanting to get off medication, reversing type 2 diabetes, or having a goal of being able to play with your grandchildren. Those are much more meaningful goals. And they really create this mindset of a lifestyle change, not just a short-term solution. Eat real food as much as possible. I like to say if it runs, jumps, swims, flies, or grows in the ground, that is a whole food and it's a good choice for you. At every meal, try to center that meal around protein. Not only is this crucial for keeping your body healthy, but it's going to keep you full longer and it's going to reduce those carb cravings. Eat plenty of healthy fat without going crazy and adding it to everything. As much as you can, start knocking down those roadblocks. Significantly reduce sugar, processed food, and those seed oils, and you are on your way to better health. Along the way, be patient, be nice to yourself. If you start your journey and then you backtrack, don't give up. That's okay. It's just a day. It's a blip. Consistency is really what matters, not those days where we all go off the rails. So just be patient and be consistent, because real change takes time. It does not happen overnight. And lastly, do not see this way of eating as a diet. See it as a lifestyle change. Be flexible. What's best for you today may not be best for you a year from now. But as your health improves, it's you're going to be able to determine what a good level of carbohydrates is for you. What way of eating makes you feel your best? That's it for my jumpstart. We can absolutely get in some more detail during the Q&A session. And right now, I'm going to turn it back over to Corey.
Well, Allison, I am thoroughly hungry after that. Those were some very delicious visuals that you have for us. And one of the points you mentioned, the fact that 75% of all the food in the grocery store is some sort of processed, I'll call it garbage, is kind of disheartening. But I also remind when I talk to my patients that get discouraged, right? We want to try, a couple of people started here tonight to talk about they've done low carb before, life happened, they kind of take a step back. And honestly, I'll say this, I feel like I tell my patients, like, it's not your fault. You have some of the smartest people in the world generating these food products that are not good for you to make you addicted. They literally are designed to make you, like, potato chips dare you to only eat just one. Too pop, you can't stop. They're daring you to do it, and you can't. So I think, like your advice says, stick to real food. Like, low carb can be very simple. It doesn't have to be strict keto. There's a whole spectrum, and I think that having a great support system is what's helpful. It's happy, healthy holidays, exciting. I'm going to be taking notes. My wife asked me what I wanted for my birthday, and I said, I'm waiting to see what we have here tonight. So I will turn it on over to you. And then once we're done here, we'll finish with a little open discussion, Q&A, and that'll be that. So
okay. So navigating the holidays, it shouldn't just be a struggle to survive. There are many tasty ways to thrive, so let me show you how to do this. Holidays are a part of our lives. They're not obstacles to be feared, but they're special times to be enjoyed. So let's see how to do this. How you navigate the holidays has a lot to do with your reason for eating this way. A person with diabetes or a person with epilepsy still need to have their blood glucose in check. But someone who's watching weight and who's trying to lose weight can be a little bit more flexible than someone who really needs to check their glucose often. Research has shown that sugar can be an addiction trigger. It's actually shown on MRIs that light up when people eat sugar, that it looks just like an addictive brain. So it may be a healthier, happier holiday for you if you have this problem, and to just go ahead and avoid carbs totally. Planning ahead will mean you need less willpower. Success is much more likely. So let's see where this journey is taking you. If you know you're going to a restaurant, look at the menu online, decide what you're going to eat and drink. Simple dishes have less chance for hidden sugar or starches or those bad oils that Alison was talking about earlier. So you can always bring your own healthy salad oil to make sure you're not getting any of those inflammatory oils into your body. For most people, being merry includes having a drink or two. You do want to be aware that the impact on your decision making will be impaired once you have a drink or two. Also, it's very good to avoid sweet mixers, because the reason they're sweet is because they have sugar in them, which we don't want. And if someone asks you what you want to drink, it's always good to say the driest wine you have, because that will be the lowest carb content that's possible. Beer is not your friend. There's a reason a beer valley is a well-known term to describe those who love their beer. And some low-carb varieties are available, but it won't help you if you have a lot of it. Again, I already said avoid drinks with sugary mixers. A dry martini like 007 will go down well. It only has 1 gram of net carbs. And a gin and tonic has less than 5 gram net carbs. So you can calculate your daily carbs and make sure you stay within those limits when you know what's in your drink. Sparkling water can be a tasty alternative to an alcoholic drink. Some ice cubes, a lemon wedge, and some bubbles can give you a delicious guilt-free drink. Most hostesses will welcome extra dishes of appetizers, sides, or dessert. That's one less thing for her to worry about. So talk to your hostess before you head out to a house party. Appetizers are really easy and quick to make. Here's some of my family's favorites: deviled eggs and stuffed mushrooms. These recipes are available at dietdoctor.com and they're really easy to make. You can never have enough dessert. And luckily on low carb, for special occasions, it's allowed. And these recipes here, the one that I haven't yet made is the low carb pumpkin pie. But I've heard from people it's really good. So if you're a pumpkin lover, here's one for you to try. The chocolate cake and the cheesecake. The cheesecake was actually our Thanksgiving dessert. So we can definitely recommend. Have a look at ketodietapp.com for the pumpkin pie, and the other 2 are on dietdoctor.com. All their recipes are very well tested. Especially during the holidays, the main dish of meat is very welcome when you're restricting carbs, because meat does not have a lot of carbs in there. You might want to watch out for the sauces that are added though. Having a small low-carb snack before the event ensures you do not lose control at the bread basket. So make sure you don't go on an empty stomach. Most people don't realize how being tired can prevent success. If you're rested when you go out, it will be easier to make choices in line with your goals. So to circle back to the beginning, remember why we celebrate, and with a little planning, you will be sure to enjoy every minute of your holidays.